All right, it's the Science Tutorial Office again, and this time we're talking about brains, okay? There's two major, well, there's a couple of things here that we need to definitely look at. There's the bigger unit, okay? And the bigger size unit up here, that's the cerebrum, okay? And then you have this little guy right here, and that's the cerebellum. And that's easy to remember because you think of a little bell ringing. Ring my bell. Ding, 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 ding. That's going to help you remember it, I promise. All right? And then from like here to here, you have the brain stem, okay? I like to think of this as like an ice cream cone with my scoop of ice cream, all right? So my cone is gonna be the medulla oblongata. And then my little scoop of ice cream is the pons, all right? Or like Andy likes to say, the pregnant pons. And then my little midsection here is midbrain. And I know it's a stretch, all right? So there's the different components of the brain. And then we've got like little wiggly worms. That's the gyrus, those raised surfaces. And then we got these like little depressed lines. If you're depressed, you might be sulking, right? And that's a sulcus. And then you got like these really deep dividers. That's a fissure, all right? So like this in particular is a longitudinal fissure, all right? Each thing has like a lobe and a purpose and a function. So let's go over some of that. So if I'm at the front here, that's going to be the frontal lobe. All right, you probably already know that because when you were studying the skull, you know that the skull bones are going to correspond with your brain lobes, which is pretty convenient. So you have frontal, then you have parietal, and then you've got on the side where your ears would be, those are temporal or temporal. Okay. And then you've got the very back, and that's going to be the occipital, or like DeAngelis likes to say, occipital. Occipital? Yeah, that's what she likes to say. All right, now the function. So right here, frontal is going to be motor. All right, parietal is sensory. All right, I like to remember this because it's like MS, and it goes in alphabetical order, MS. Now I want to kind of like connect that to your spinal cord. All right, you've got your ventral dorsal horn, your posterior or dorsal ventral horn, dorsal horn. Did I say that right?
Dorsal root ganglia?
Well, the dorsal root ganglia is actually right here. I know that's, so to orient yourself, when you see that bulb back there, and by the way, that was Andy. When you see that bulb back there, that's your dorsal root ganglia, all right? And so you know that's the back, all right? Kind of orient you there. Now, what's gonna happen is they're gonna have something pinned here, or they're gonna have something pinned here, maybe even here. And they're gonna say, is this motor, sensory, or both? All right. Cool thing is that it's the exact same thing as the brain. MS, MS. All right. Motor in the front, sensory in the back. Now where they connect, that's going to be both. All right. Another thing that they like to ask, like while we're on this, they might pin right here and they might say, is this gray matter or white matter? Okay. And I want you to not get confused because when you're nervous, things get very confusing. All right. So see how these two kind of look alike? But notice that this one's white in the middle and this one's gray in the middle, all right? That white is that myelinated white matter. It's gonna move faster, all right? And then the cortex, and whenever we say cortex, we mean like the outside, that's gonna be gray. Whereas our spinal cord is gonna be gray in the middle and then white on the outside, all right? So hopefully that helps you with that model when they ask you that, all right? Now, coming back here, now you know your different lobes and your functions. The occipital is sight, and then the temporal is going to be hearing. And that makes sense because you've got your ears right there, and that'll help you remember it. All right. The sight one's a little bit trickier. So let's flip this guy, look on the underside, and we're going to see this X. All right. Now, if this right here, where it's been cut off, if it was extended, it would hook up to an eyeball. So if this was marked right here, like pinned right there, that would be the optic cranial nerve 2. If it was pinned right here in the middle of the X, then you would be referring to the optic chiasma. And then our line back here is the optic tract. So it's kind of like you see something, it comes in here, it's received, it flips, and then it ends up in our occipital lobe, and that's where we're going to see what we're going to see. So think of yourself falling, hitting the back of your head, and seeing stars. That's your vision, all right? While we're on the underside carriage here, we see these bulb looking things. All right. If I look at the model, you can see we're talking about right there. That is going to be the olfactory bulb. All right. This is where we're going to have the ethmoid bone right there. And your cranial nerve 1, the olfactory smelling nerve, is actually going to go through the cribriform plate, all right, where you have your olfactory foramina. Foramina is just plural for foramen, so open holes, okay? Right here is that olfactory tract, all right? And so that takes care of cranial nerve 1, cranial nerve 2. Could they ask that? Heck yeah. Optic chiasma, yeah, any of that stuff, all right? Your midbrain, notice that you're really close to your vision, and you're also really close to your hearing, those ears. And so it's part of auditory and visual. That's that function, all right? Now, they might like to pin the ice cream cone, the medulla oblongata, and they might ask about that. And they might say, name 2 out of the 3 functions of the medulla oblongata. Well, actually, they won't tell you what you're looking at. They're just going to name 2 out of the 3 functions. Now, what I want you to think about is that your most important vital functions are right here. If you were to get in a car accident or have a stroke up here in your cerebrum, you might talk funny, you might walk funny, whatever, you might have a hard time, but you probably live. If you have a stroke or some type of head injury down here, it's probably going to be fatal because these are your vital signs. So think about what's vital. Is breathing really important? Yeah, so this is respiratory. What about your heart rate? Yeah, kind of have to have a heart rate to be living, so heart rate. And then the last vital thing that it's going to be responsible for is blood pressure. In your lab manual, it says vasomotor, but just think about that, vascular motor. And your blood pressure is like dilating or constricting your blood vessels. And you'll learn more about that in AP2. But 3 functions: breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Okay? I know that the pons also plays a part in respiratory, but most likely this is where your questions are going to come from. All right? Moving from the cerebrum down to our little guy down here, our cerebellum, that's going to be equilibrium, all right, and balance. Okay? Now, looking at other ways, like you have your limbic system. Your limbic system is what's going to manufacture and produce the CSF fluid, the cerebral spinal fluid. This is going to, your limbic system basically fits right there underneath this white line. And if you were to be tested over this, oh, that's kind of gross. If you were to be tested on this, it would probably be on the model. But this guy right here is the corpus callosum. So callosum, like making a phone call, like hello, hello, it is what makes these 2 hemispheres talk together. So in order to communicate between the left and right hemisphere, you need your corpus callosum, all right? And then underneath there is going to be your limbic system. So these are your lateral horns. Lateral ventricles. I know, you're guys going to have to deal with that. Lateral ventricles, okay? And then right here is your 3rd ventricle. And then you have this little slide here. This little slide is your aqueduct, your cerebral aqueduct. And then at the very bottom here, this triangle, that's your 4th ventricle. So maybe they're going to use this model to ask about the limbic system or the ventricles or whatever. And you know there'd be lateral ventricles, 3rd ventricle, your cerebral aqueduct, and then your 4th ventricle. Or maybe they're going to ask using one of these brains. So this little triangle right here, that's going to be your 4th ventricle. Notice that it's all the way down here in your brainstem area. So they would need a frontal coronal cut in order to reveal, here's those big ventricles, but this is where the question is, right here below. I like to say 1, 2, 3. That's the 3rd ventricle. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. The other thing that people like to ask about, or we like to clarify, is, by the way, notice that's where that ventricle is going to go, right? So right underneath that, so you have your corpus callosum, your ventricle, your lateral ventricle, and then right here would be like your thalamus, your sensory relay. And then underneath that would be your hypothalamus, which is going to be your homeostasis. Now, right here is too delicate and it's been cut off, but you have like this little ball right here. So corpus callosum, lateral ventricle, Then you got your thalamus, hypothalamus, and then right here is your pituitary gland. Okay? And that's part of delivering hormones. That's what you're going to find out. It's endocrine. It's what you're going to find out in AP2. Other than that, I think that covers it. So good luck.